We learned in a previous study that when Adam and Eve sinned and were banished from the garden, that they lost their relationship with God and the knowledge of God, which was intrinsic to that relationship. The true knowledge of God, which can only be discovered in an intimate relationship with God, is now available to the world through God who came in the flesh, Jesus Christ. In Christ, we are able to know God personally because we have received the mind of Christ, 1 Corinthians 2:16, in our inner selves at salvation. This truth has profound implications for Christian education. Knowledge to the Western world has become nothing more than the collection of data. That kind of knowledge makes us arrogant, but love edifies. See 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 1. The Apostle Paul says, "But the goal of our instruction is love from a pure heart and a good conscience and a sincere faith." 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5. The truth, Christ and His Word, should set us free and enable us to conform to the image of God. And by this all men will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. John chapter 13, verse 35. What happened to Adam and Eve emotionally after the fall? They were not only darkened in their understanding, but they also became fearful and anxious. The first emotion expressed by fallen humankind was fear, Genesis chapter 3, verse 10. And fear of anything other than God is mutually exclusive to faith in God. Why is the fear of God the beginning of wisdom? Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10. And how does it expel all other fears? Dr. Neil Anderson states that as he was writing the book Freedom from Fear, he became aware that we are living in an age of anxiety. People around the world are paralyzed by fear of anything and everything but God. Chuck Colson said, "For the church in the West to come alive, it needs to resolve its identity crisis, to stand on truth, to renew its vision, and more than anything else, it needs to recover the fear of the Lord." Another emotional byproduct of sin is shame and guilt. Before Adam and Eve disobeyed God, they were naked and unashamed. Genesis 2, verse 25. God created them as sexual beings. Their sex organs and sexual activity were holy. But when they sinned, however, they were ashamed to be naked and they had to cover up. Genesis 3, verse 7. Many people mask the inner self for fear that others may find out what is really going on inside. And when you're dominated by guilt and shame, self-disclosure is not likely to happen. Humankind also became depressed and angry after the fall. While researching and writing the book Finding Hope Again, Dr. Anderson discovered that we are also experiencing a blues epidemic in this age of anxiety. He states that depression is so prevalent, it is called the common cold of mental illness. Visits to the doctor that resulted in a diagnosis of depression almost doubled from 1985 to 1995 in the U.S., and overall, there was a tenfold increase in the 20th century. We will continue our look at the effects of the fall in our next segment.